Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Actors Union online workshop with your host, Aaron Marcus. Aaron's got a great guest today, James Sheridan, and we're going to be breaking down all the elements of the SAG-AFTRA Actors Union for you. And before we get started, let me go ahead and introduce our host, Aaron Marcus. Aaron is America's premier acting and commercial modeling career coach. He's also a top-selling author and founder of HowToModel.com, one of Google's top-ranked acting and modeling career sites. Aaron Marcus has been a full-time actor and commercial model for over 26 years, and to date, he's booked 1,191 jobs. You've seen Aaron in projects such as Burn After Reading, Law and Order, Criminal Intent, The West Wing, Crybaby, America's Most Wanted, Molson Beer, McDonald's, Kmart, A Modest Suggestion, HBO's The Wire, and Disney World. Aaron's also appeared in print ads throughout the United States, Europe, the Netherlands, and Asia. And Aaron has written what many consider the most important book for commercial modeling, entitled How to Become a Successful Commercial Model, and it's now in its 5th edition. He also writes and publishes the Tear Sheet newsletter, a quarterly commercial modeling and acting newsletter. Aaron, welcome to today's workshop.
Hey, thanks so much, Joel. I am really excited today. We're going to be talking about unions, and I've got an incredible guest. His name is James Sheridan. He's the owner of Production Payroll Services, and I'm going to be explaining to you a little bit later exactly what a payroll company does and what exactly they do that's connected with the union. But first of all, I want to say hi, James. I'm so glad that you're with us today. I'm so glad you're here. Great. And
thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. This is the first time we've had a workshop that dealt specifically with the union. So let me just get started, just to give people a very brief history of how the union got started, what they do, and then we're going to actually get going. I mean, basically, the Screen Actors Guild, it's also known as SAG, it got started in 1933. And the reason why the union really took place and was created was basically it was ending a lot of bad practices within the acting industry. There used to be mandatory contracts. There were no limits to work hours. The studios could dictate the talent's private lives and their professional lives. There were contracts that would automatically be renewed. I mean, it was really pretty brutal, and so they decided to start a union. And then in 1937, there was another union that got started, and it was called AFRA, AFRA, and it was really interesting. I was brought up to New York to give a workshop for AFTRA members, AFTRA, and I was walking around the building. It's this beautiful building with these incredible old pictures from union meetings, and I'd asked the president, I said, what exactly was AFRA? Because I wasn't familiar with it. AFRA was American Federation of Radio Artists, and that was before television. And so later in 1952, that's when AFTRA turned from AFRA to AFTRA. And so, anyhow, that's just like the little bit of a brief history of what those two unions were about and why they got started. So, James, let me start off by asking you, what kind of things does the union, now that we are merged, and we'll talk more about the merger later, but what does the union do for actors today?
Well, in general, like any labor union, they were established and continue in order to ensure the wages and working conditions of their members. So as you mentioned, in the early days of movies and in radio, there were things that we think are just absolutely ridiculous now by our standards in terms of what the employers could do to the actors and radio performers. There were a lot of actual performers rather than announcers in radio those days. So the collective reasoning was that, look, we need to establish guidelines and rules and a certain set of wages that we know will exist across the industry so that these folks feel protected and that they're not taken advantage of.
It's funny you mention that because sometimes when I tell in my in-person workshops, I might go through a list of some of the rules and regulations of the union, and sometimes people just kind of scratch their heads when I say things like, well, one of the rules is you have to have a working bathroom
Right.
within relative distance to wherever you are working. And people, what are you talking about? Or, actors, have to be fed every 6 hours. Otherwise,
Right.
there are meal penalties. And people go, well, the reason for that is because, years ago, those things weren't offered. And basically, you're not happy, well, then leave, and they could work you as long as they wanted. And now we do have some restrictions where at least, and basically they call it golden time, where if you work over 16 consecutive hours on a set, the union tries to prevent people from having to work that long, and the way they do that is you have to pay the actors a lot more. You start getting, at least for extras, you start getting a full day's pay per hour once
That's
you've
right.
reached, you've gone over the 16 hours. And so, yeah, I mean, you're right. Some of the things that we kind of scoff at or think are a little bit silly, they're actually very, very, very important, and so they really do a wonderful job in protecting actors today.
Yeah, and they're very real situations. One of my it's funny you mentioned the bathrooms. One of my very first set visits when I worked at the Washington SAG office when I was a rep there was to a movie shooting locally, I think just outside of Baltimore. And one of the things that I had to bring to the assistant producer's attention was that there was not a working restroom within a reasonable distance of what they would refer to as the extras holding area. And so, here I am. I think I had been on the job 6 months, and I had to go talk to this producer that there wasn't a porta potty or a restroom close enough for all the extras. And when you think of all the things that a producer or anyone in the industry is thinking of, some of those things rank really close to the bottom of the list. So those contracts are there to remind the producers that say, look, these are people, they're your employees, they're professionals, and they're entitled to and deserve certain things, and we're going to make sure that they get those things, and that if they don't get those things, there's usually financial remedies that they would receive. Like you said, Aaron, if an extra goes into golden time, they get a day's pay for every hour past the 16th hour. And yeah, it may turn into a long day, but it's ends up being quite a nice payday, and also an incentive for the producer not to do that. So it works very well.
Yeah, and even sometimes it's little things that you don't really think about, but I've certainly have talked with people who've worked on sets, and they are working in the dead of winter, but the scene is supposed to be taking place in the summer. So
Right.
they have the extras in t-shirts and shorts and sandals and flip-flops, and it could be, 15 degrees outside. And for this one particular shoot that I was told about, there was no tent that was heated
Right.
near where the extras were working. And one of the things that can happen is if phone calls do go into the union with members complaining about that, then the union can actually have all the extras walk off the set, besides
Absolutely.
just, being fined. And, the fact is that would shut down production. And I don't know what the specific costs are per hour, for a film to run, and I'm assuming there are so many different factors involved depending on the type of film, but it would be very costly for something like that to happen. And so, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, the union really is there to help protect people. Now you had mentioned, well, we talked a second ago about the merger. So basically, there used to be, well, there's Equity, which is the union for theater actors working on stage. And then the two other major unions, it's the Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. And they merged in 2012. Actually, it was March of 2012, I believe.
Right.
And maybe you can tell us a little bit, why was there a merger? I mean, it had worked, they worked as separate unions for many years.
Well, the biggest issue, well, there are two issues. One from the members' standpoint that would lead to a more beneficial union if the two unions had merged. And that has to do with benefits in particular, also in cost reduction for becoming a member and continuing to be a member, initiation fees and dues, those sorts of things. One union would be cheaper than two. From the other standpoint, from the union administration itself, there was so much overlap that developed over the years between SAG and AFTRA that they were covering a lot of the same material. For example, the commercials contracts, the contracts that cover TV commercials, principal, on-camera principals, extras, and voiceover, dancers, models, everything that a TV commercial would have. They had, for years and years and years, jointly negotiated contracts. So that would mean if you took the AFTRA TV commercials contract and the SAG TV commercials contract, excuse me, they are literally word for word identical. The rates are the same. Everything is the same. The only difference would be where one says AFTRA, the other would say SAG, and where one says AFTRA health and retirement in terms of the benefits, the other would say SAG pension and health. So for a long time, it made very little sense to a lot of people to have these two separate unions that covered the exact same thing. And years ago, the jurisdiction was established whereby SAG would cover all material that's shot on film, and AFTRA would cover all the material that's shot on videotape. So if you're a producer and you're shooting a commercial on film, then the SAG contract would apply. If it's video, then the AFTRA contract would apply. These days, as you know, everything is digital, high definition. There's really no film and tape anymore. So that's another reason why their jurisdictions have sort of broken down. It made a lot more sense to merge the unions. And in March, when the current contracts for SAG and AFTRA, the old legacy contracts from the two separate unions, are set to expire, they will have their first new contract with the newly merged union sitting across from the advertisers negotiating a single contract to cover television commercials.
Yeah,
likewise with TV programming, there's a lot of overlap there. So some TV show that you see on TV may be under a SAG contract and another may be under an AFTRA contract. The rates can be a little bit different there, but as you can see, there is so much reason why they should be one union with all this type of work going on.
Well, you touched on an interesting point, because one of the things that I had heard about as far as why a merger was desired was because a lot of the production studios have merged, and at least in the film industry and even in the TV industry. And in the past, it was possible for those people to play one union off the other when they were sitting down to negotiate. And I guess people felt, well, if we have one unified union, then you can't play one union off the other and try to get lower rates. But from what I hear, it sounds like a lot of the television shows today are AFTRA shows, or well, at least I guess prior to the union. Is that true? At least as when it comes to actors getting pension and things like that. Are they mostly AFTRA?
Yeah, I think AFTRA has a slight edge in terms of the number of TV programs that they cover as opposed to SAG. I'm not sure of the reasoning behind that. I don't know if the rates or residual structures are more favorable in one or the other. I do know that they're fairly close.
I think they're more favorable to production for AFTRA than with the SAG. So I'm assuming that's one of the reasons. Now you had mentioned, and I just wanted to jump in because we were talking about TV commercials, and you mentioned something about models. I just wanted to make sure that people understood there is no union for modeling, and that basically the union has no affiliation with modeling. So I mean, they might hire models to be in commercials, but I just want to make sure people understood that there was no contract, any kind of union contract for models.
That's correct. Basically, the SAG and AFTRA contracts will cover anyone in any position, in any covered position, the contracts speak to the type of production as opposed to the specific roles in the production. So if you are a singer, let's say you may belong to AFM, which is the American Federation of Musicians, but if you do a radio commercial and the ad agency for that radio commercial is a AFTRA radio commercial signatory, then even as a singer, as a member of AFM, you would still be paid as an AFTRA member because that radio commercial was produced under an AFTRA contract. Same with SAG. If you're a model, even if it's still work, let's say you were in a still campaign and they wanted to integrate a still shot of you as a model into a TV commercial, and you see that sometimes, you would be paid the same rate as an on-camera principal who actually has lines in the commercial.
Now, you would mention the term signatory. Would you explain exactly what that means?
Yeah, very simply, the signatory, which is required for any union-covered project, is the entity, the company, the advertising agency, production company that is actually signed to the specific union contract. So as a union member, that is your number one obligation, and that is to only accept employment from someone that has signed the applicable union contract. So if you are booked for a job as a union member, one of the very first things that either the casting folks or you, if you're being booked directly, would need to verify or should verify is who the signatory employer is for that particular job. And that is going to ensure that you receive all the protections under the union contract. Without that small piece of minutia, sort of all bets are off. You can actually run into some hot water with the union for violating that obligation, and more importantly, you're not going to be protected, and you're not going to be ensured that you receive the money that you're entitled to, and so forth.
Isn't it, is that called, I'm trying to remember, is that a Station 12?
A Station 12 is a name that they give to the process on the production side. So a casting director may have a list of people that are going to be in this particular commercial or production, and one of their obligations is to make sure that they hire only union members that are in good standing. So a Station 12 or a cast clearance is basically a listing of all the performers that is sent to the union office, the particular office that has jurisdiction in the geographic area where they'll be working. And the union checks their membership, makes sure that they're paid up in their dues, that they're actual members in good standing, that there are no problems with their membership, because production can run into fines and things if they hire members that are not in good standing.
Okay, so let's get to the really important stuff here. Somebody wants to join the union. Now, there used to be a couple of different ways. With AFTRA, you could actually, and I don't know what the exact term, but you could basically buy your way into the union without any experience whatsoever. But since the merger took place, that's no longer in effect. So why don't we talk about some of the ways that somebody can join the union today?
There are a few different ways. The easiest way is that, and especially this might be most applicable to your audience. Let's go back to that example of a model that was in a still campaign, and the advertiser wanted to incorporate some of those stills into a TV commercial. So the model may not be a member of the union, but they have these great shots, and they want to incorporate them. So the producer would, of course, have to pay this model the going rate for an on-camera TV performer, and they would have to apply for a waiver to employ someone that's not a union member. And the name of that waiver is called a Taft-Hartley waiver. And it's basically the production company or the ad agency asking the union to use someone that's not currently a member of the union, where otherwise they would be required to do so. So one of the reasons on the waiver request is, why are you hiring this person as opposed to somebody that's already in the union? And in this case, the reason would be, well, we have a still campaign with this model, we like the shots, we want to incorporate them. That's submitted to SAG-AFTRA, and they can either approve or deny the request. Generally, they would approve it. So then that person would be paid for the TV commercial, and then by virtue of that, that would be their first union job, and they could choose to join SAG-AFTRA based on that work experience. So that's one way, and that is to get Taft-Hartley into a covered position on a union production.
And just to jump in for 1 second about that, the same thing can hold true, and I've seen this happen plenty of times. If you are working as an extra, you are a non-union actor, you're working on a movie set, and for whatever reason, either the director, the first assistant director, somebody in production walks over to you and says, look, when this actor walks by you, I want you to say this. They give you at least one word to say. You've got to have a word. Then that will give you an upgrade. And the same thing holds true. They will give you that Taft-Hartley to sign, which will allow you to be paid as a union actor. And then I'm trying to remember, do you have 30 days in which you can continue to do non-union work, but if you want to do another union job, then you have to join the union at that point?
Yeah, that's very close. There's a 30-day window after your first union job where you could do both union and non-union work. So once you are SAG eligible or SAG-AFTRA eligible, you would have that 30-day window. After that 30-day window expires, they want you to sort of make a decision on which way you want to go. So after that 30 days, if you are up for another union job and a Station 12 clearance was submitted for you and you had not joined at that point, you would come back non-cleared. So the production company would not be able to use you. Likewise, if you have joined in that 30-day period or you make arrangements to join within that 30-day period, you would only be able to accept union work after that point. So it's a way for SAG to say, here's what we have to offer, here are the working conditions you're going to enjoy as a union member. Now the decision is up to you, which way do you want to go. Now, your eligibility, I believe, remains intact for a fairly long period of time. So once that 30-day window expires, it's not like you have to sort of start all over again and get your eligibility back. You would, at any point after that, I believe, up to a certain point, I think they do cut it off. But you would be able to join SAG by virtue of that initial job that made you eligible.
Now, do you have any idea? I mean, we talking about, do you have months of being eligible, or is it a year or years?
I'm not entirely sure of the time frame. I do know that they keep the data for quite a long time. So, I would think a year at least, but it's something we need to check with SAG-AFTRA.
Okay, so one of the ways is you could be given a union job, or you earn your way into a union job and you sign the Taft-Hartley, you get this waiver. So that's one way of joining the union. How about some of the other ways?
Well, there's the old 3 days as an extra in a covered position, which all the people that do extra work in Hollywood on the West Coast, that's what they're striving for. But there's an important distinction to be made there, and it's 3 days as an extra, but it has to be in a union covered position in order to qualify you. So anytime there's a movie that has a large number of extras in a particular scene, there is a quota whereby the first 50 or 45, I'm not sure the exact number, of extras in a given scene, on a given day rather, need to be union. And then the balance of any of the extras that are needed can be non-union, and they can pay them, whatever they want as long as it's, minimum wage in that particular state. So if they're having trouble finding enough extras for a particular scene that are union members to meet their quota, they may go outside the membership and say, okay, you're going to be in a union covered slot today. That means you're going to get the union wages, all the union rules apply, you're going to get your proper meal breaks and things like that. And so that's your 1 day in a union covered position. If you can get 2 more to make it a total of 3 covered days, at that point you will become SAG eligible. So the same situation would apply once you have that 3rd day.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I mean, I know some people that have contacted the extras casting director and they let the casting director know, look, I want to join the union. Would you really keep me in mind whenever you need to fill some union extra slots? Because I would love to do it. And, people are generally pretty nice about doing that if they can and they like you. And that is a great way. Now, I've heard some rumbling about possibly doing away with that at some point, because some union members are concerned that there are too many people joining the union that really don't have much acting experience. But as of right now, that is a way that a lot of people actually join the union. Now, once you've got, they call them vouchers, like you get 3 vouchers.
Yeah, the voucher is basically just a piece of paper that you are given on set that keeps track of your day, your work day, your hours, your meal breaks, and things like that. When you are dismissed at the end of the day, you get a copy of that voucher. A copy of that voucher is kept in production, and then a copy is also sent to the union office. So 3 vouchers, and more importantly, your pay stubs. So if you have those 3 days, your 3 vouchers, and your pay stubs that show you were paid the union rate, that you were in a covered position that day, you can take that and walk into SAG and say, here's my my 3 days. I'd like to go ahead and join. So that and pay the initiation fee, and you could become a member at that point.
So as an important lesson, make sure that after you get your check, never throw away that pay stub, because that will be your easy proof that you actually worked as essentially a union extra for those 3 days. And that
Exactly.
holds, and that also, you can hold on to that for, is that also like a year? Is there a time limit on, how long that lasts?
I believe there is, but I think they give you a fairly lengthy period of time to take advantage of your eligibility. So it's best checked with SAG membership, SAG-AFTRA membership, to see what that window is.
Okay. Okay. So far, the couple ways you get upgraded, or I guess you could audition for a union project and you book it, or you're a model and you're placed in a union project. How else can somebody become a
Well,
union?
that's pretty much it.
Well, I
If
thought, wasn't there also, if you are a member of a sister union?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, if you are a member of Equity or I believe AF of M, by virtue of that, if you're a current member in good standing of those unions, you can join SAG-AFTRA
Yeah, I think
under that.
if I'm not mistaken, I believe the rule is, like you said, you have to be a member of good standing. I think you have to have been a member for at least a year. And I think you also have to have booked one principal job in that union. It can't just be an extra job, but it has to be a principal job. And then that will allow you to also join SAG-AFTRA as well.
Yeah, that sounds correct. I think under the equity contracts, I'm not sure that they break down between principals and extras, but if you have worked under an equity contract, I do believe that is a requirement. So a member in good standing and having recently done work under an equity or AFM contract.
And so what are some of the costs? And I know that they vary, and I guess as we are beginning to talk about some of the numbers for joining the union, everybody needs to understand that these numbers are fluid and they can change. And I know there are votes coming up, and there are meetings coming up with contracts. So I mean, I'm sure James will be able to, give everybody some numbers, but just keep in mind that they can change, and it's always best, just to double check at the SAG-AFTRA office. But like, for instance, right now, and I know it does vary across the country, what are some of the different costs for joining SAG-AFTRA?
Yeah, I think currently the top tier initiation fee is just over $3,000. And as you said, Aaron, it varies by market that you're in, and I think it comes down to just over $2,000 for an initiation fee. And then there are dues according to how much you work during the course of your dues period, your membership period, and I'm not sure if that runs a calendar year or a membership year.
Yeah, and basically, I know you pay twice, or we pay twice a year, and it's a pretty small percentage of whatever you earn. Um, but yeah, so basically, you've got one membership fee, and then you pay dues twice a year. And for that membership fee, I mean, because $3,000, I mean, that's a lot of money to join a union. Um, do you have to pay it all at one time, or do you know how they work that out?
Well, I believe that there used to be a couple different ways. It was a big deal locally here in the Washington market when they started accepting credit cards to be able to pay your initiation fee. But aside from that, SAG-AFTRA does offer now financing of your membership, I believe through the SAG Credit Union. So they have that option, but it's you're either going to pay in full or it's going to be financed through them, or in rare situations, I think they do make some sort of accommodations for either hardships or things like that, and they may put you on a payment plan, something along those lines.
So when we were talking about some of the benefits of being in the union, certainly we talked about, just having better working conditions. Certainly you get paid a lot more. It seems like one of the biggest distinctions between doing, let's say, a union TV commercial and a non-union commercial are the residuals. And
Absolutely, yeah. One of the greatest achievements in the union contracts for commercials, TV and radio commercials, is the residual structure. So for TV commercials, basically, as long as the agency is airing that commercial or wants to retain the right to air that commercial at some point in the future, roughly every 13 weeks you're going to receive some type of residual payment. And that can be either a holding fee, which keeps you exclusive to the product that they're advertising, or it would be a cycle payment in which your pay would be based on the markets in which the spot airs, or the number of times that it airs, or the networks, the cable networks that the spot is airing on. So the residual structure in SAG is complicated, but it does ensure that performers are going to get paid into the future for their work, as long as the advertiser is receiving some benefit from using that commercial that you're in.
so just to kind of uh, break it down into real practical terms, when you do a non-union television commercial, I mean, typically what's going to happen is you get paid a session fee, and that fee can vary. I guess it depends on the market. It depends on whether it's a local, regional, or national TV commercial, depending on the company itself. But after you do that commercial and you get paid for shooting the commercial, that's it. And that
Right.
commercial could run for the next 10,000 years, and you're not going to receive any other fees from it. So just so everybody understands very specifically how it works with a union TV commercial. And once again, we're going to throw out some numbers, but just understand those things could change. As of right now, for a union member to do work, let's say for an 8-hour day on a TV commercial, the pay rate is what for the session fee?
It's currently $592.20.
Okay,
And that, as you said, is just for the shoot day, an 8-hour shoot day. That commercial can never see the light of day, and you would still receive that money just for the actual work day.
and then if you go past 8 hours, there's overtime pay, correct?
Right. The ninth and 10th hours would be paid at time and a half, and then beyond that is double time until you get to golden time, which is very similar to the extras days pay for each hour beyond 16.
Okay, so then, and maybe we can break it up into different segments. So let's just start off with a local television commercial. So since you are familiar with the DC area, let's say there's a TV commercial. The actor is going to get paid the 592.20, and it's airing in Washington, D.C. There's more money that the actor will receive once they decide to start airing it, along with the session fee. And could you explain the whole concept of units and what that's all about?
Sure. Um, there's three different sort of tiers, and Aaron, the one you just mentioned would be considered a wild, what they call a wild spot. There is the session fee, and then there is a unit system whereby media markets are ranked by population and viewership in terms of units. So Washington, D.C. happens to be a 6-unit market. So in the contract, a unit is designated a dollar value. So you would receive payment according to the total number of units in the markets where that spot is airing. So for a DC spot, you would receive, as you mentioned, the $592.20 for the session fee, and then you would receive actually an additional 5 units of use, because the first unit is always included in the session fee. So you would receive an additional 5 units, which currently is about $20 for an on-camera performer, $20 per unit. So another $100 or so on top of the session fee. And that gives the agency the right to air that spot for a period of 13 weeks in the Washington, D.C. market.
And they can run it 10,000 times a day, once a day. It doesn't make any difference.
That's correct. There's no limit on the number of times or the outlets, the broadcast outlets that a spot can run once the wild spot market has been paid for. Now that's very different if the spot goes to multiple local cable systems, or we're talking about network broadcast and things like that.
Okay, well let's hold off on that one, because I do want to get some of those numbers, but let me just finish this one out first. So you've got the local TV spot, and then you've got regional, where basically it's the same concept, but instead of it just running in, let's say, Washington, D.C., maybe it's running in Maryland, maybe Pennsylvania, maybe Virginia, maybe West Virginia. So now you're talking about more units. So it's the same session fee, but you have a lot more units. And then you've got national television commercials. And by the way, and I'm assuming this is still true, but I know as of a couple of years ago, the majority of the income that was made by union actors didn't come from people doing feature films or even television shows. It came from commercials.
Right.
That's where a lot of actors really make the bulk of their money, if they are doing commercials, but at least union members make the bulk of their money through commercials. So for a national spot, I mean, you're talking about I have no idea how many units there are for wild spots when it goes national.
Well, it can vary, depending on what. And I have people that call me all the time that want to know what the rate for a performer would be in a a quote unquote national commercial, where there's a bunch of things that can play into that. Now, it can be a wild spot that airs in markets all around the country. A handful in California and different markets from coast to coast, and it's still considered a wild spot. So in those cases, you would take the total number of units for all the markets that the spot is airing in. And it's important to know that this is just broadcast, over-the-air broadcast television. The cable is a separate entity. So yeah, I add all of those units, and the pay would be based on that. And the agency can add markets as they go. So you may receive the session fee payment first, and then you'll receive a check for a couple $100s for the initial buy. And then the markets get expanded, and then these small checks will start to trickle in as the markets are added to the media buy. So it can definitely get quite lucrative, and that's just on the wild spot side of things. So the other two ways that a spot could be quote unquote national would be a national broadcast television, which they would consider a program commercial. And that can be very lucrative because you are paid according to the actual number of times that spot airs in a given 13-week cycle. So if it airs on ABC 3 times, you receive a payment for each of those 3 times.
And just so people understand that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, like when you were talking about those specific times that the commercial is aired, basically if somebody likes they want to air this commercial during the show, The Office, and that's because they believe that the people who watch that particular show would be interested in buying this product. So they buy and they purchase a 30-second or 60-second time slot during that show. that puts it into a very different category, and I believe those are called Class A's.
Correct.
And that's where every time your commercial is aired, you get a check sent to you.
That's right.
Now, isn't it also true that the more often it airs, the less money you get from each airing?
Yeah, there's a sliding scale where the first airing is a certain amount, and then that amount reduces for each subsequent airing. There's a block, I think it's like the 3rd through the 13th airing, something like that, where the amount is set on a per airing, and then there's a 14-use guarantee that you receive an amount, and then subsequent to that, every time it airs, it does reduce to a rather small amount. But if you think of some of the commercials that you see on television, where it seems like you're seeing it, every time you turn it on, and think of some of the payments that those actors are receiving, it can definitely be run into a lot of money.
Now, now for the first Class A airing, is it still that session fee and then plus
That's
some
correct.
kind of unit structure?
No, the Class A, the program spots, you would receive an equivalent to the session fee for the first program Class A airing, and then subsequent airings, as we said, reduce in the amount of pay. And then the whole cycle starts over again in 13 weeks. So once that, from the first program airing to 13 weeks, after that, it starts over at the first airing again, and you continue to
Oh,
slide
wow.
down that scale.
And so basically it's the 592.20 every time it airs.
Right.
Wow. Now I've known some people who have earned now like, and I'm not trying to get people excited and thinking that everybody's going to do this. I mean, I've never hit the jackpot like this, but I know people who've made $250,000 from one television commercial.
Yeah,
Now,
it's not unusual. It can really add up, and that's sort of these actors that are going to commercial auditions, and their hope is to land a big national commercial because you put in one day of work, and you conceivably get checks for a couple years after that. And that's not even going into, there's a whole separate process that would have to happen if they stop airing the commercial and stop paying you, and then say 6 months down the road they want to bring that commercial back. They need to renegotiate with you and reinstate the commercial, and at that point basically you can negotiate your own rates, and if they want to use that commercial, then they basically have to pay what you're asking to reacquire the right to air that commercial. So it can get really expensive from the producer side and really lucrative from the performer side.
but the other thing just to keep in mind, I mean, in order to see that kind of money, if you're making scale, which is like, the minimum union rate, I mean, a commercial would have to run for years and years and years to see, that kind of money. But it does happen. And I can also tell you that in today's time period, I find it to be a little bit more difficult to land some of those very lucrative national spots only because years ago, famous actors would not be caught dead doing television commercials in the
That's
United
right.
States. It was beneath them for a famous, movie actor to be doing a TV commercial. Now they might do one in other countries and get paid a fortune. But in today's time period, when you watch television, not only just television shows, but even radio spots or voiceovers on TV commercials, these are famous actors who are paid a fortune, and unfortunately, that also cuts out a lot of other actors from landing those kinds of jobs. But yeah, I mean, it's really true, and something you would also mention. I just wanted to repeat so people really get it. There is something called a holding fee, where if the company decides, you know what, we've aired it a couple of cycles, we're not really sure what we're going to do with it in the future, but to prevent you from working for a competitor, what we'll do is we're going to pay you a holding fee. And
That's right.
so it's not airing at that point, but you'll still get your, what is it, the 592.20 for.
Yeah, basically, everything works on 13-week cycles. If an agency wants to retain their right to air that commercial, and more importantly, they want to retain your exclusivity to that product. So part of what happens when you're paid for as a principal for a TV commercial, for Pepsi, let's say, as long as you're receiving payments and holding fees, you are prohibited from appearing in a commercial for a competitor. So if you got called and booked for a Coke commercial, you'd actually have to turn that job down because you are being held to Pepsi in terms of your exclusivity. So if the agency decides to sort of pull the plug on the spot, they're not sure what they want to do, they're going to put it on the shelf, they're not saying that they're not going to air it anymore, so they have a couple of options. They can continue to pay you a holding fee every 13 weeks, which keeps you exclusive to that product and allows them to, at any point down the road, pull that spot off the shelf and put it back on the air without contacting you or anything else. They would still need to pay you, of course, according to how they're going to air the spot, but they don't need to contact you.
Do you know how, excuse me, I was just going to say, do you know how long they can keep that commercial on hold?
Well, as long as they're paying you that holding fee every 13 weeks, there's a point at which they hit the max use period, which is a period of 21 months from the production date, the first date of work on the production. So when that 21-month period hits, it is deemed to be automatically renewed for another 21 months unless the performer contacts the agency in writing that says, look, the 21-month period is about to expire. I'm exercising my right to renegotiate my fees, including the holding fees, for that spot. So at that point, the agency either has to engage you in negotiation and say, okay, what do you want now? Do you want 2 times scale for your holding fees and 2 times scale for the use fees if we should use it again? Or they can choose to release you from the spot at that point, which frees up your exclusivity and relieves them of the right to be able to air that spot. So yes, 21 months is the max use period.
And now, is that also a time period where an actor can say, I don't want to have that commercial airing anymore?
Yes, they can. The other option, and the reason that was integrated into the contracts, is that an actor just starting out, let's say they appear in a commercial, and for some reason or another that commercial maybe is not so flattering to that actor's career or position, the 21-month time frame gives them sort of an out, and they can basically notify the agency, and they can say, I'm exercising my right under the max use period to pull myself from this spot, so they would not be able to use that spot anymore if someone chooses to do that.
Yeah, and to put it in very specific terms, I was once working on a set and spoke with an actor, and he was an older gentleman who had done, years ago, had done some kind of like hearing aid. It was a national spot, but it was a hearing aid commercial, and all of a sudden this guy's career just took off, and he's starring in movies, and he really didn't want that hearing aid commercial to be running anymore. So he, notified them at the, after the 21 months or at the, that time period, and just said, hey guys, thank you very much. It's been great, but I just don't want that to continue running.
Right.
And so, okay, so we talked about, commercials and, how helpful they can be. How about as far as like working on a feature film? What kind of fees? And once again, just to reiterate this, and I'll probably say this again for every single one, these things will change. They will change, not they can change. They will change. But as of right this second, an actor working on a feature film for a day, let's say just your standard 8-hour day, what is scale for that?
I believe the current scale for feature films is about $800.
Yeah, I think it's like
range.
a little bit over. It's like in the 800s, but yeah, it's 800 something for the 8-hour day. And like for a television series, isn't it pretty much the same?
It's pretty close. I think it's a little bit less, but it's pretty comparable, yeah.
And so then once you are, let's just say, a day player, then that also entitles you to residuals on those projects, correct? Just like a TV.
That's right.
Not just like a TV, because it's not like every 13 weeks, but there are residuals in place for those.
Yeah, in general, for residuals, if we're talking about movies, there would be a residual structure established. It's based on the total amount that you earned on the movie when the work was done. And then there's formulas that the residuals department works out for the production companies and you would receive residuals according to new venues that the movie goes to. So when it's released in theaters, you actually don't receive anything additional than what you already made. Then when it releases to DVDs, when the DVDs are sold, when it goes to pay cable, when it goes to free cable, then broadcast television, and then the number of times it airs on broadcast television. So there's this sliding scale for the types of use and venues that the production company puts the movie in.
Now,
That's basically how it works.
so would it work? Let's say you worked as a day player on a television series, and so you made your 800 something for the 8 hour day. But let's say you worked on it for 2 days, and there was a lot of overtime. Maybe there were, penalties involved. I mean, there's even something like where there's a certain turnaround period where you've got to give the actor, I'm trying to think, is it like 12 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours
Right.
rest before the next you start shooting? So, and if you break that, it's very expensive. I think it's like 900 some dollars
Yeah.
if you don't give them the proper rest period. So I'm just going to throw out a number. Let's say an actor made $3,000 in 2 days, just because of all the additional, penalties. When the person is receiving residuals, does that get included in what they will earn, or is it really only on that basic 800 something a day?
I'm pretty sure that it is based on the total amount that you earn for that project. So basically, when a movie wraps production, they are required to submit to SAG a final cast list, and part of the data that they submit is the amount of money that each performer earned over the entire course of the production. So that is all fed into SAG's residual system, and I must confess I don't know how exactly that's structured. I do know that most people don't know how exactly that's structured, and if you are lucky enough to be a principal in a movie, you are going to receive checks that sometimes aren't written for even the amount of the postage that it took to get the check to you. But you will receive checks, and it will say on the check what it's for. DVD sales, 500,000 plus. However it's determined. Yeah, these checks will continue to just sort of trickle in for literally years and years, as long as that movie is out there somewhere. And it's also sort of a brave new territory with things like Netflix and streaming video and all of that things. And the contracts are addressing each of those issues, and it is built into to the residual structure.
And just to get some general ideas, and then I do want to move on, but just so people have some kind of concept, if you were doing a union radio commercial, do you know like what the minimum pay is for that?
Yeah, a
For the
session fee,
session
and it
fee?
works. It's very similar to television. The biggest difference between radio and television is that the concept of exclusivity and holding fees doesn't exist in the radio commercials contract. Basically, for walking into a recording studio and recording a radio commercial, they can have you for up to 90 minutes in the studio to record a radio commercial, and you're going to get about $260. I think it's currently $262.80 to just record that radio spot. And then you would get residuals based on the markets where the spot would air, or a similar structure for spots that air on network radio programs or network news programs. The same thing. So, and that also runs in 13-week cycles for wild spots, and same structure. Markets are assigned a unit value based on population and listenership. And then each unit value or unit is assigned a dollar value, which is currently starts off at about $3.86.
Oh, so it's much less per unit in radio than it
Much
is in.
less, yes.
God. And I forgot just to ask just very quickly for a TV commercial, if it is running on cable, is that less or is it the same as just regular wild
Yeah,
spots?
it's a different rate structure. There are two basic types of cable commercials. One is going to be a network cable commercial where it would run on, let's say, CNN and NBC, MSNBC, things like that. And then each of those cable networks is assigned a unit value, much like the wild spots, and then the unit values are, or the units are assigned a dollar value, and it's a sliding scale according to the number of units. And then local cable, if they're buying multiple local cable systems, Comcast in Atlanta or things like that, where it may be just in your local market, but on cable, there is a more of a sort of a flat fee structure for that. You would receive an amount equivalent to a session fee, and that would give them the right to air on multiple local cable systems up to, I think it's about 30 million subscribers in total for a period of 13 weeks.
Okay, great. And just so that people know, I mean, there are other areas of the industry as well that you might not be as familiar with. Like, for instance, one of them being there's something called industrial films or corporate films or educational films. It's all the same thing. And these are training films. And it could be anything from a company doing a film to help teach new employees how to use some equipment. It could be something that you see in a big box store on video of somebody demonstrating how to use this new special mop on the floors. It can be a government film for, it could be the CIA, the FBI, teaching people how to, interrogate people, medical things. There are tons of those around. And actually, that is an interesting area for people to look into if you're interested in trying to do some film work. Do you know what? Could you tell us what the fee structure is for an industrial film or a training film?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. There's a great market for industrial, non-broadcast, educational material for the professional actor. I can almost guarantee you that your viewers have seen some sort of film that would be covered under these contracts. You watched a DVD that shows how to install your computer or put together your exercise equipment or work out on your exercise equipment, all of those types of things. Videos that are seen in department stores that are touting a product, things like that. Those
On
are all
airplanes.
covered. Yeah,
When you're
all
sitting in
covered
your
under the
chair.
industrial educational contract. And so
And
basically, it's there is a day rate. There's day players, half day players, extras, different categories of extras. And it's basically a lot of the same rules, an 8-hour day. There's overtime provisions, working condition provisions, things like that, and it all goes to ensuring that the actors are treated as professionals.
do you know what the day rate is for a principal doing an industrial film?
I believe it's currently, there's two categories of non-broadcast. There's a category 1, which is an internal training or PR piece that's generally not meant for general public consumption. And then there's category 2, which is the higher paying of the two categories that has some sort of general public consumption or retail aspect to it. So within, the difference between the two is not that great. It's roughly about $500 for a day's pay, an 8-hour day, and there is a slight residual structure, but nothing like TV commercials or theatrical motion pictures. You would get a residual for different types of use in terms of venue, or if they wanted to sell or rent the DVD. But outside of that, there's really not too much residuals that are paid on industrial non-broadcast.
Right, there's no 13-week cycle or anything like that. And also, if you're fortunate enough to be the on-camera narrator, where you are the only person talking to the camera, then you're talking about a few $100s more for doing.
Yeah, that's right. That off-camera narration is paid by time in studio. So depending on how long the video is, you're going to receive about just under $500 for up to the first hour, and then you're paid for each additional half hour in the same session. And if they call you back in for retakes or pickups or things like that, there's a fee that lets them do that. So it's very similar, but yeah, the voiceover people in that particular contract, under those particular contracts, generally make the lion's share. It's the easiest work, and they make the most money.
But actually, and I was also referring to the on-camera narrator
Yes.
of the industrial film, not somebody just coming into the studio. Quite often you might see somebody on the set just talking to the camera, introducing a scene, then you watch other actors. And I can't even remember, is that like $700 for the on-camera
It's
narrator?
actually closer to 1,000 for an on-camera narrator. You would receive the on-camera narrator rate, which is roughly that $1,000 figure for the first day, and then it drops down to the day player rate for each subsequent day
Mhm.
on the same production. So yeah, if you're an on-camera narrator, and I guess that the difference there is they're thinking that you're going to need either teleprompter skills or other acting ability that maybe day players may not need for those types of productions. So there's a premium for on-camera narrators.
Okay, so now that we have a lot of the very specific information about the union, then the question that comes up with a lot of people is, well, should I join? And certainly, I mean, people can hear that you can earn a lot more money, you've got more protection, better working conditions, you're just treated better as a union actor. But and look, and I am. I'm a vested member of SAG-AFTRA, which means I have a pension. I've earned enough money over a certain amount of years. And having said that, I also have to say that the union, joining the union, is not for everybody.
I would definitely agree with that, and there are so many factors that can come into play when a person is determining if becoming a union member is something that they want to pursue. And it can range from your geographic location, is there a lot of union work where you are, or is the majority of the work non-union? So, the biggest drawback to joining the union is as soon as you become a union member, you have to turn down any work that it's non-union. So, you may be doing great doing these non-union industrials or non-union commercials, what have you, and you think that the next logical step is for you to join the union. Well, if you're going to stay in that same area, by doing that, you're sort of automatically cutting yourself off from what's gotten you to that point to begin with. So geographic location is a big factor. Anything else from are you going to dedicate your time and your effort? It takes a lot of work to become successful, as you and your viewers well know, to becoming successful in this industry. So if you're going to keep it as a sideline and do some extra work when you have the time and it's a nice little extra income, things like that, then maybe joining the union is not something for you at this stage in your career.
And the other couple factors are also your experience. And look, certainly every once in a while you hear about somebody with absolutely no experience, no training, got spotted someplace and ended up in a feature film. And yet those things have happened, and there are people that hit the lottery as well. So, like with any other kind of job, the more experienced you are, the more training that you've had, the more that you've studied, the more that you've practiced, certainly that will give you, your best chance for having success. So if you really haven't done very much, my suggestion is try to get as much non-union work as you possibly can. Try to do.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I
I
was just
would
going to.
say that
I'm sorry.
there's just no substitute for experience and sort of honing your craft. A lot of people find that the union finds them rather than the other way around. So if you're sort of going about your business and you're doing this non-union work and it's going well for you, a union job may sort of creep up on you and you may not even realize it. You may be called for that audition and realize it's a union job and you get it, and then you're forced to make that decision. But if your goal is to simply join the union with the idea that there's going to be this new world of work that opens up for you, to a certain extent that's true, but you have to keep in mind that all the people that are competing for that same amount of work against you, and also the amount of work that you're now closing the door to by joining the union. So it's a difficult decision for a lot of people.
What I think would be really helpful if you are thinking about wanting to get more work, doing films, doing television shows, whether it's voiceover work or radio spots. I mean, the best thing to do is look. You can try to do student films, non-union student films. You can do non-union television commercials. There are independent films that are non-union. Try to work as much as you possibly can. And then if you find that either there is union work in your area or you are considering moving to a larger market where there is more work, then that would be a good time, to really start investigating joining the union. And I do want to just kind of go over some of those steps again, but just on a little bit of a side note, let me just tell you, there are union actors who have this philosophy of, hey, look, I'm going to do this non-union gig. Really, who's going to find out about it? It's a, internal industrial film, or it's a small independent film. Who's going to know? Well, let me just tell you, besides the fact that I don't think it's a good way to run your business by being dishonest, the other thing too is if, and it's an if, but if you are caught doing a non-union job where you are a union actor, you can run into some really serious issues. And for someone who's worked for the union office, could you just mention a couple things that could happen to a union actor who's been caught doing non-union work?
Yeah, I mean, it can range anywhere from a fine to all the way up to, expulsion from the union. And, all that work that you've done to get to that point would just be for naught. So it's very serious. And, the rationale that, no one's ever going to find out or no one's going to see it, well, that may have been a lot more true 15 years ago before the internet came out, but everything is out there now. So all it takes is one person to see it and say, hey, isn't that guy in SAG, and shouldn't there have been a union job? And then a whole can of worms is opened up. So you should really think about, once if you decide to join the union, that it should be one way or another. You shouldn't try to sort of play both sides of the fence, because the repercussions are just too much. You're gonna do irreparable harm to your career. You don't want to find yourself in the position of being able to be in the union and then having them tell you that they're taking you out and you don't have a way to get back in. So.
Okay, so basically then, if somebody, they're doing non-union work, they've had a lot of experience, they're building up their resume, and now they're at a point and they go, all right, I'm ready to look into joining the union. Here are some of the things that you could do. And we talked about this earlier in the day as far as ways that you can join. The simplest way that I would recommend is to try to get the 3 vouchers and do the extra work and be brought in as a union talent. Certainly try to audition for union acting projects and understand that if you are cast, you will join. Maybe, if there is another union which is considered a sister union, maybe join that union and make sure that you do work in that other union, and then you could join SAG-AFTRA. But those are things that I would definitely do. And if you are going to move to a major market, and just so that everybody knows, like when we were talking about, the largest population where the most units are, the 3 largest markets in the United States is Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. So if you're thinking about moving to a major market, then I always find that it's much more beneficial to you to have already joined the union.
That's right.
As opposed to going to a major market and then trying to join. Because if you go there and you're already a union member, you'll be taken more seriously by industry professionals. So those are some of the things that I would definitely look into doing if you feel like you are in a place and you're ready to join the union. So just to kind of wind up some things here before we go to the all the questions. Hey, James, so for your company, and once again, it's productionpayrollservices.com, so everybody can check that out. Why don't you just explain what you do for union actors?
Well, basically, our clients are the production companies and the advertising agencies. Now, one of the biggest benefits that the unions instilled in their contracts a while back is that anybody that's employed under those contracts has to be treated, in fact, as an employee. And with that comes a whole host of things that advertising agencies and production companies may not want to get involved with. So the services that I provide through my company and other similar payroll services, number one is that we are the employer of record for anyone that we payroll. So with that, that means that we cover them for workers' compensation insurance and unemployment insurance. So when you do a union job, you receive a check with taxes withheld from the check. They contribute to FICA and Medicare on your behalf. You receive a W-2 at the end of the year. And if anything were to happen while you're doing that job, you're covered by workers' compensation insurance. And you would, in theory, if you so choose, you can file for unemployment if you find yourself out of work for whatever the required amount of time is for in your particular jurisdiction, and you would receive unemployment benefits based on that. So those are the benefits that we provide that are required under the contract. There are a whole host of things that we provide as services to our clients. We help track residuals for TV commercials and radio commercials when they're due. You know, the whole host of budgeting and estimating when they're putting productions together. We can tell them ways that they can save money depending on how they book their talent, how they utilize their talent. We also payroll crew. We deal with the crew unions for them. We deal with all the IRS issues. So basically, what we do in a nutshell is they can hire all of their talent and crew through us, and we issue them one invoice that they pay, and we take care of everything else that needs to be done that goes along with using union performers and employing people under the federal and state laws.
And what's also so great about your company, and I guess this is okay to say, but you know, if you have a gig and it's through James's company, and let's say you've got a question about payments, you have a question about some of the numbers. I mean, there are many ways of doing it, but you can also shoot an email, you know, to James and ask him, so how much do you think I might be able to get for this, or what is the rate for this? And they'll be able to give you, you know, he'll be able to give you all the specific numbers, so you know exactly what you're going to be earning.
Right. One of the things I've always offered, you know, having a background, I worked at the Washington after SAG office for a couple years, and so one thing that I've always told you know, performers, especially in this market that I've known for so long, is you know, any question they may have that they either feel a little awkward about asking the union, or you know, they may not be able to get in touch with someone at the union office. I'm always happy to lend whatever knowledge or experience that I have, you know, regarding the contracts, different situations. I've seen so many of them over the years. So even if my company is sort of nothing to do with the production, and you have a sort of an oddball question that you need an answer to, I always encourage people to email me, pick up the phone, and I'll be happy to tell you whatever I can to help you out.
And they can get to you, people can get to you through productionpayrollservices.com. They're
Yep, and go to productionpayrollservices.com. The email address is there. The phone number, all that information is there. I'm on LinkedIn as well, so anybody out there, feel free to connect with me that way.
great. Well, James, thank you so much. Let me just find out from Joel if we are ready to go to question and answers at this point. So hopefully, Joel, we're ready for questions.
Hi, Aaron. Yeah, we've got some questions coming in from various people. I have a question from John. John actually wrote in and asked a question. It's a little long, so let me go ahead and read this for you guys. Can James and Aaron, you guys can both hear me, correct? Right?
Yeah, yep, I can hear you.
Fantastic. All right, so let's get right into this stuff. So John asks, I was wondering how it's determined whether someone who's done several background parts in different film and cable productions is eligible for union membership. Does an individual have to present proof of participation in a production, especially with non-speaking extra roles, even if that's through a payment statement from a studio production company? How visible does someone's appearance in a part have to be if that's a consideration? Is a minimum amount of work in different films, shows, or commercials a requirement? Do you guys understand that question?
Yeah, actually, I do. Actually, James, you want to
Sure.
talk about it first, and I can pop in there?
I think we mentioned that the criteria as far as background work to become eligible for SAG-AFTRA is 3 days of background work. But it's important to distinguish between a covered position and a non-covered position. So anytime a production shoots with background performers, there is a quota that they must meet for, I'm not sure of the exact numbers, I think 45 for a commercial or a film. I think that's the current number. So the first 45 background performers on a given day must be SAG members in good standing. The balance of the need for production for the background can be made up of non-union folks, and they can be paid whatever sort of the going rate is as long as it's minimum wage for the state that they're working in. So it's not just that a person would need to work 3 days on as background on a movie. It has to be in a covered position. So that's an important distinction. So your pay stub or your pay voucher should indicate whether or not it was a SAG covered position. So if in fact it was a SAG covered position, you should be able to take your voucher or pay stub to the membership office, and they would be able to verify that you in fact did work those 3 days through their records, through the paperwork that the production company is required to submit, and through the pension contributions that the production company makes on behalf of the covered extras. So with those two forms of documentation, then you would be eligible to join SAG-AFTRA. If it was not a covered position, it was just a background position in a non-covered position, then that would not count toward your 3 days that you would need to qualify to join SAG-AFTRA.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you were brought in as a union extra and you did it, 3 different days, then you can join. But if you were brought in just as a non-union, as James said, non-covered, but just a regular non-union extra, it doesn't make any difference whether you did that 20 times or 1,000 times. That doesn't get you any closer to becoming a union member. And it also doesn't matter of how clearly you are seen in the film. You could have a close-up of your face, and that is, I mean, it's fun to see, but as far as getting to join the union, it's meaningless unless you were actually given a word to say.
That's correct. So for background, as you said, Aaron, you can have a tight shot on an extra's face, completely recognizable, but unless they have a line, they're still considered an extra. Now, oftentimes, if background performers are going to be prominent in a shot, the union usually would like to have those extras be union extras, as opposed to the people that are in the far background. The union generally likes to see those folks as the non-union extras. And the folks that are more prominent in the shot be union extras. But I don't think that there is an actual requirement that is the case. If you do get upgraded, I was going to say, if you do get upgraded on set and the producer director asks you to speak a line, then you're sort of automatically upgraded to a principal performer, and that would automatically put you in a SAG-AFTRA covered position, and all you would need as a principal is that 1 day, and then you would be eligible to join SAG-AFTRA based on that work.
And one other thing I was just going to mention, for television commercials, it's a little bit different as far as needing a word or a line to say. You can be, and I've done this, has happened to me a number of times, you can be a principal performer without having any words to say in a television commercial. And my understanding is that basically, if you are doing something in the TV commercial that helps move moves the scene along or changes something in the scene of this commercial that makes it important, then you can be considered a principal. So one of the differences between getting an upgrade from a union film and a TV commercial is, like we were saying, in the film, you actually have to be given a word or line to say. In a commercial, you don't. And one other just slight exception. Sometimes the union will make different arrangements if there's a scene where they need an audience to scream or scream out a couple of words. In those situations, typically people aren't given upgrades for that kind of situation. So, you know, there are always exceptions to the rule, and there are always agreements that are worked out. But hopefully that will answer your question.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. For TV commercials, the only criteria between to distinguish between a principal role and a background role is that a person is recognizable in the shot. So even if you're not critical to the action being performed in the commercial, if you can see and clearly recognize someone in the spot, that would make them a principal, regardless of whether or not they have lines in the commercial. So that's a very good point. And the other thing about crowd scenes, where they call those omnis, where it's a group of people cheering or chanting at one time, there is an exception for that situation in films and commercials oftentimes as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. This is good stuff. Okay, so Irving has a question, and he writes in, how do you inquire about Taft-Hartley if they do not ask you if you're an extra with no lines? I was told to ask the producer, but in my experience, they don't want to be bothered and they're too busy. So how do you inquire about Taft-Hartley if they don't ask you if you're an extra with no lines?
Yeah, the Taft-Hartley is a waiver. The production company or the ad agency would apply for this waiver, and it's basically asking the union to use someone that's not a union member in good standing, where otherwise they would be required to do so. And generally, the reasons for a production company needing a Taft-Hartley is some special skill or some special look that they cannot otherwise find in the existing union membership. So it is sort of a touchy situation. I generally would not advise anyone to bring it up on set, you know, going up to the director and saying, hey, can you Taft-Hartley me? Those types of situations are usually determined beforehand. In a case where you might be a background performer and the director says, hey, it would be great if this person at this point says this, then that would be an on-set upgrade, and then after the fact, the production company would then send in that Taft-Hartley waiver. And sometimes there can be problems there because the union would want to know why you picked this particular person that's not already a union member, when there are, you know, many union people to choose from to have a line in this film. So it can get sometimes contentious between SAG and the production company. There can often be fines that are levied from SAG to the production company, and if they deny the Taft-Hartley request, that does not mean that the work would not go towards the eligibility of the performer to join SAG. What that would mean if the Taft-Hartley is not approved is that the production company could get fined for using somebody that's not in the union. But you would still have that day to qualify you for your SAG-AFTRA membership. But I would not recommend at all someone, a performer, trying to get the Taft-Hartley themselves. It's usually done sort of behind the scenes or as a matter of necessity rather than you know, and I know this exists, that sort of favors are done here and there, but I really wouldn't recommend it. There's you know, so much going on at that point that producers and directors usually don't like to deal with that stuff on set.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, I mean, typically if there is an upgrade and they do need to Taft-Hartley you, they will pretty much automatically give you the paperwork for that. But just as a general rule, if you ever run into an issue on a set and whether it involves, union things, whether you should be upgraded and all that. Typically, what I always recommend people do is don't get into battles and negotiations with, either ADs, assistant directors, or PAs, production assistants on the set. What you really want to do is, and I find that the union is really good about this, contact the union office afterwards. I've been in situations where there were discrepancies as to exactly what time the shoot ended, because, and without going into all kinds of crazy details, but sometimes if you drove to a location and then you were placed on a bus and then you were bused to a set, I mean, typically the way that it's supposed to work is your day ends, you clock out when you get back to your car, not when they say, okay, the shoot is over today, because it might take you another 15 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes to get back to your vehicle. And so when you are being checked out, if the people who are checking you out are, signing you out at an earlier time than you think, personally, I don't feel like that's the time and place, and I don't think that the production assistants are the people that you really want to deal with. And what I've always done is, if I needed to, I will contact the union office, and they're really good at making sure, as long as you can verify everything, that you will get paid what you need to get paid. But just in general, trying to get into negotiations and battles with people on a set is not a good idea, and I agree with James 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. So the next question, guys, is from Frank, and Frank says, just to be sure I understand the approximate fees to join the union, did you say it's a $3,000 membership fee plus a $2,000 initiation fee plus yearly dues?
The way I understand it, the initiation fee is the first one-time fee that you pay when you join, and I don't believe there's any other fees involved other than the annual dues. Aaron, you as a member, you can probably address that a little bit better.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right, Frank. You're talking about spending way too much. You pay. No, you don't have to pay. I'm not sure where that second fee came from that you were discussing. It's a one-time initiation fee. And once again, that fee can vary depending on the market that you're in. But after that one-time initiation fee, then the only other fees that you pay are the dues, which happens twice a year. And it's a very small percentage of whatever you earn. So those are the only fees that I can think of that are involved with being in the union.
And of course, at the time of this recording, these are the fees, and things can always change. In fact, they will change as years and months roll on, just to be aware of that, depending on when you're listening to this. I've got a question from Jeff. He's from Toronto, which is in Canada. And his question is there a union similar to SAG-AFTRA in Canada?
Actually, I can jump in with that one. It's called ACTRA, ACTRA. And it's the Principal Actors Union in Canada. And like in the States, Canada is very protective of their actors, and they primarily want Canadian actors working on Canadian union projects. And it's one thing if it's an American project that is being shot in Canada, which certainly does happen, and then Americans go and work there. But if it's a actual Canadian film or television show or commercial, they really want to use Canadian actors. And of course, there are exceptions to the rule, and there are ways of working within the system to make sure that you work there. But just like for Canadian actors, it's a little bit more problematic for them to work in the States. Having said that, there are tons of very famous actors working in the U.S. who are Canadians, but either they've been here for a while, they've gotten, and I don't want to go into all the details with working visas and things like that. But yes, as a long-winded way of answering your question, there is a union in Canada, and it's called ACTRA.
Great. All right. And Kaylin from New Orleans writes in, I have heard the term right to work state. What exactly does that mean?
James, do you want to touch on that, or would you like me to jump in
Yeah,
with that one.
I can address that a little bit.
Great.
My understanding of a right to work state is that there cannot be a condition of membership in order for someone to work. So, in other words, you cannot be required to be a member of a union in order to be hired for a particular job. So it is more applicable to what I would call blue-collar unions, more typical labor unions, than for something like SAG-AFTRA. But different states believe that you cannot require someone to join a union just so they can have a job. So unions do exist in those states, and the rights and protections are guaranteed under the contract. But I believe that those rights are extended to anyone who works in a given company that signed a union contract, but they cannot be required to join that union. So Virginia is a right-to-work state, so I don't believe that the union can fine a production company for using someone that is not in the union, as long as they meet their obligations as a producer and pay them the correct amounts and give them all of the protections that are guaranteed under the contract.
Yeah, there are a lot of right-to-work states in the United States. Some of the larger ones, Florida is a right-to-work state, Louisiana is a right-to-work state, Texas is a right-to-work state, and I'm thinking there are about 20 right-to-work states. And James, correct me if I'm wrong about this. Yeah, but like you were saying, my understanding is that you don't have to be a union member, and you can work on union projects. They do allow that. Is that also partially what being in a right-to-work state means?
Yes, that's how I understand it. It's a little murky when you're talking about freelance workers, people that do TV and film, as opposed to someone who goes to the same job every day, 9 to 5, and works under a union contract. The right-to-work states are basically saying, okay, if you work at a automobile plant, let's say, and there's positions open, a preference of employment clause in a union contract would tell that employer that, look, you have to first check with our membership roles and hire someone who's already in the union before you go outside of our membership and hire someone else. So right-to-work states do away with that requirement. They can hire anyone they want that's qualified for the job, and those folks would not be required to join the union once they start working for that employer. So applying that to what I would call the freelance contracts that SAG and AFTRA administer is that basically the production company can hire anyone that they want, and the union would not be able to fine them for hiring somebody that's not already in the union, and likewise that person would not be required to join the union at any point to keep accepting union work.
Okay, very good. So guys, I got about 3 more questions we're going to go through, and then what I wanted to do is let Aaron kind of say a few last things and close us out, and then I'll say some very final things to fully close us out. But let's get to these last 3 questions here that people have written in. Kyle from San Diego asks, can actors get insurance covered if they are in SAG-AFTRA, and also can they get pension as well? Maybe you guys want to explain. Maybe some people don't even know what pension is. A few people, you might want to explain what a pension is.
Absolutely. I can address it from one side, and then as a member, Aaron can address it from that side. But anytime a union member works under a union contract, the employer contributes to both a pension and a health plan. At this time, even though the unions have merged, the pension and health plan still remain separate. There are a number of issues in merging pension and health plans, so those issues are in the process of being worked out as a result of the merger. But anytime someone works, there are contributions made. So SAG-AFTRA members who have earned enough in a given period that qualify for their health and pension plan do enjoy health insurance, and would at some point, if they work enough, become vested in the pension plan. and in theory receive retirement when they reach a certain age.
Yeah, and basically, it's a 10-year period. You have to earn a certain amount of money per year, and once you've done that for 10 years, then you become vested. And once again, and the numbers change all the time, especially for insurance. And it's unfortunately, it's although it's understandable, but it's gone up tremendously over the years as to how much you have to actually earn to get insurance. But basically, what happens is, like James was saying, every union job you do, whoever is paying for the job has to kick in, and I can't remember exactly what the number is. I know at one point it was 12 point something percent on top of whatever you earn that goes towards pension. And then generally what will take place is, if you don't earn your minimum amount for that year, all of that money goes back into the general pool for the union, and I guess that's what helps funds the current actors who are collecting a pension. And so, yeah, if you do earn enough money, you will get an insurance plan, which is great. And then if you also earn enough money over a 10-year period, then you actually will collect a pension when you retire. And I think it's around age 65, something like that. And you get a pension, and it's all based on how much you've earned.
Very good. All right. Next question is from Jim. He's in Phoenix. He said, I heard there was a way someone can do union and non-union work. And if that's true, how do I know this can be done? Or I guess, how can this be done?
There is a mechanism to do that. It stems from a years-old case. I believe it was having to do with the Postal Workers Union or something like that. And the term for that is called financial core. And financial core exists because someone brought a case and they said, I don't mind being in the union, but I don't like the political actions or the political groups that my union is using my dues and my initiation money for on my behalf. So I don't want my money going for these types of things that I don't necessarily support. So financial core means you pay a reduced dues structure, and you, by virtue of that, you would be allowed to do both union and non-union work. It does get a little tricky, especially with these freelance types of contracts. Again, the whole situation arose from a more blue-collar, typical labor union type situation, and it is a very touchy subject. I know in a couple of the union offices that I know of, there's sort of a running joke that if you want to speak to the very top person at that office, if you call and speak to the receptionist and mention financial core, you will be automatically transferred to one of the higher ups there to discuss that situation with you. So, and there are downsides to financial core. I believe that there are some things that some services that you don't receive that other union members may receive, but I'm not exactly sure what those things are.
Actually, I can explain some of those. You cannot, if you decide to become financial core and you fill out forms and you send it in, I believe the way it's described, you are like a dues non-member.
A dues paying non-member.
And so when that happens, you cannot attend union meetings. You're not allowed to vote for union elections. You get taken off the list when they're having the SAG awards and DVDs are being sent out, and free tickets to theaters and things like that. You're cut off of that list, and you're right, it is controversial, and there are a lot of union people who are very upset with financial core, because basically what can happen is a producer can hire a union actor who has chosen to go financial core, pay them non-union wages, because they are not officially a union member, even though they're paying dues. And then some people would say, well, why would that producer ever want to hire union talent and pay them union wages? Because they don't have to if they can get somebody who's gone financial core. So it's controversial. There are a lot of union actors who are very angry about it. It was a Supreme Court case, so it's out there, it exists, and it can be very damaging to the union. But there are people who've chosen, to go that route, because if you are a union member and you are caught doing a non-union job, there are some, very serious things that could happen to you as far as, union-wise. But if you're financial core, that does allow you to play both things. You can do non-union work and you can do union jobs as well.
Great. Thanks, guys. So we've got one more question here, Aaron. And then after this question, I want to just ask if you could wrap us up, and then I'll wrap us up after that. This is from Mandy. She's in Boston, and she says, I just graduated from college with a theater degree. I'm considering moving to New York to pursue film and TV. Would you recommend I try to get my union card in Boston and then move to New York? Or should I just move right away and get my card after I move? What do you guys think?
James, do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, I've got a couple ideas.
I think we touched on this briefly during the interview portion, but if it's at all possible, and you can get your card in Boston before you make the move, I would certainly advise that. You're going to be competing with a much larger talent pool once you go to New York or LA or Chicago. So if you have the means to get your card before you go in Boston, I would certainly do it that way. And then that way, once you're in New York, you're sort of already a step ahead of everyone else. You can go on all the union auditions and so forth as already having your card.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, whenever you're considering moving to a major market, whether it's LA, Chicago, New York, I mean, having a union card, especially if you don't have representation at this point, you'll be taken more seriously by being a union member. The only thing, you just don't want to join the union too quickly. You don't want to just rush in with absolutely no experience and potentially, do 3 days of covered union of extra work, and then start trying to get representation right away without really having done very much. So, without a doubt, having a union card, it's prestigious. It puts you into a very different kind of category. And that doesn't mean to say that everybody who is a union member is a phenomenal actor, because there are, as we mentioned during the interview section, there are a number of ways that you can become a member without necessarily showing a whole lot of talent or having a whole lot of acting experiences. But without a doubt, going into a city as a union member, it's very helpful to you.
Very good. Aaron, would you like to say some last minute things before I wrap us up for the day?
Yeah, I was just going to say just a couple of things. One is, so just in kind of summarizing things, with the union, from all the things that you've heard, I mean, the union can be so helpful to you. There can be so many benefits to you. You can certainly earn a lot more money by being in the union and with all the protections that you have by being a union member. And it's a personal, along with a business decision for you. And some of the questions you have to ask yourself, are you ready to join the union? Are you living in an area where there is union work? Certainly that's something else to keep in mind. And but I think that the more information you have about the union, you'll see that it's a great organization that, or it's a great union that really helps the talent, and something that we didn't even touch on, just so that you all know. I can't speak for every union office around the country, but there have been a number of them that I've given talks at. It was in New York and Las Vegas, certainly in the DC area, and I know there are a few others where I've given some talks. And workshops are offered. They have conservatories, and quite a few of these are free. There are various things within the union offices where they help people in the community, and so it's more than just people negotiating basic contracts and things like that. They do so many great things for actors and also just for people people in general. So if it's of real interest to you and you're ready for it, without a doubt, the union can be really, really very helpful to you.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Aaron, for hosting us today and giving us all this great information. And James, man, thank you so much for being with us. I know
No,
on
it's
behalf of
absolutely my pleasure.
yeah,
Happy to do it.
absolutely, man. It's been great to have you here. If you'd like more information about James and his business and what he does, you can find out all that information on his website, and that's productionpayrollservices.com. productionpayrollservices.com, and you can find out all the information about James and the different things he has to offer and the different services his company has to offer. Also, if you'd like to head over to our Facebook page, it's facebook.com/how to model, facebook.com/how to model. Leave us some feedback about something you learned today, about some interesting perspective shifts you had, something about unions you didn't know, or just general feedback about this workshop in a positive way. If you leave us some positive feedback over at the Facebook page, we'd love to share just this free small gift with you, a little surprise. It's nothing that we can't share with you via the Facebook page. So leave a comment there, and we'd love to have your feedback. Also, if you're interested in really taking your career and your acting and modeling career to the next level, whether it's questions about the unions, questions about how to get started, headshots, resume, whatever that is, Aaron does one-on-one coaching where he can spend time with you via Skype on the internet, or if you're in the local mid-Atlantic, DC, Baltimore area, he can even meet with you potentially personally or over the phone. But those types of meetings and one-on-one coaching can be set up by emailing Aaron. His email address is Aaron, Aaron, at howtomodel.com. In the subject line, just put private one-on-one coaching. I do know that he fills up frequently, and this month I believe he's got a few spots still open. So if you're interested, make sure you jump on that right away, and he can give you the rates and the times and all that stuff when you send him an email for that. But that one-on-one coaching has been extremely successful and powerful for people in getting their career to the next level and jump-starting that element of what they want to do. Also, don't forget to check out our website, howtomodel.com, for more information about upcoming workshops, events, all the different packages and products we have for sale there, the different free resources. Aaron posts regularly to have video blog, regular written articles, and great information on that site. There's a wealth of information there, so make sure you head over to howtomodel.com and check out all that information as well. Well, Aaron and James, thanks guys for being on the workshop today. And
Oh, it's my pleasure. And James, thank you again. You were great.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
And we'll talk to everybody really soon. So thanks everyone for being a part of this, and have a great day.